All right, welcome to today's interview here on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and I've got a real treat for you today, a first-time guest, Joseph Lumpkin. He is an author and researcher, and he's the author of many really interesting books, like the Book of Giants, the books of Enoch, the lost books of the Bible, and so much more. His website is fifthestatepub.com, and his works intrigue me tremendously because, as you may know, I've published, 103 Bible sermons so far, and I've angered a few Christians in the later sermons by saying that, hey, the Bible, it was assembled from sort of what they could find, and then some things were left out on purpose, and it's not like just every holy word of God. These are things written by men, and some of them are inserted in, some of them are altered, some of them were never found, and some of them, were censored out of the Bible. Well, our guest today can speak to that very point, that the Bible is not the whole story. It barely scratches the surface. So welcome, Mr. Lumpkin, to the interview today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Please call me Joseph, and I'm glad to be here.
All right, Joseph. I thank you for your time, and your work is fascinating to me, and we'll show your books, and I know people can get those books on Amazon and other booksellers, but how would you, just as a beginning, since this is your first time here with our audience, how would you describe yourself and your body of work?
I went down a rabbit hole and I never came out. That really sums it up. I was working for the hypersonic missile project in Huntsville, Alabama as an analyst, because what I like to do is research and apply. And Obama came in, he shuts down most of the industry at that particular time. I had written a book because I was working on a doctoral thesis. It was a book on, it started out to be a book on Jude. And I ran across one quote. It said, he's coming back with 10,000 of his saints, see 1EN. And Mike, if you're in seminary, you're usually indoctrinated and not very well educated sometimes. So I thought, well, what is 1EN? And I looked at it, and there were a couple of books out there that were translations, but they were stilted. They were Elizabethan, forced English. They were a mess. And I came home and told my wife, I want to do this. So I took about a year, and we basically modernized and put a commentary to the Book of Enoch. And the darn thing went to number 300 on Amazon. It's been years and years ago. And I came home and I said, well, in a couple of weeks, I won't have a job. So I'm going to just stay home and write. And yep. Bless her heart, she, good woman.
Okay. Well, so the books of Enoch then, these were, I've heard them referred to as the lost books, but what are the biggest takeaways? Because I haven't read the books of Enoch. I mean, I've read little passages and quotes from them, and citations, but I haven't read it cover to cover, or, there's multiple parts, but what would you say is the biggest takeaway that we need to understand, or a little teaser?
Well, there are 5 parts of the book, and they're written they're written between probably 300 BC and right at the turn of the century. We'll call the absolute outside possibly 50 AD, but we're thinking probably closer to the BC group. So,
okay.
What do you take out of it? The majority of power of that book is simply the fact that it was quoted word for word by the apostles, referred to in Peter, quoted by Jude, referred to by Jesus, and absolutely positively informs the modern Christian idea of angels and demons. It's a fascinating book, and I want to stop here and kind of give you a caveat. Okay, one man's myth is another man's religion, and we have to keep that in mind.
That's right.
And so when we delve into this, we'll find out that Christianity is not Christianity world round. We have 66 books. If you're a Protestant, you have 73 if you're Catholic. You have a couple more if you're Orthodox. If you're Ethiopic, in the Orthodox Church, there you have 81 books in your canon. Part of that canon is the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees. And these are Jubilees is kind of a midrash. It's an expansion on Genesis, and Enoch is basically an expansion on Genesis also, where it says that the angels came down and took human wives and they gave birth to giants and men of renown. Men of renown. It's interesting, isn't it? Achilles, Hercules, those demigods that are mentioned. We believe that they're somewhat connected. Gilgamesh is mentioned in the book of Giants, and so I guess one last thing. The book of Giants was found basically alongside the book of Enoch, but there were two separate books. But when I read the book of Giants, I sit down with my son and I said, Brendan, this book belongs back as part, an expansion, if you will, of Enoch. And we put it back in. We actually found the place that it belonged and set it back in to the book of Enoch. So we've got a book out there that has the book of Giants in it, along with Enoch. So anyway, that's the short story. By the way,
yes,
I know you're a patriot. I know that you keep track of this. The idea when Biden said that we did not have the hypersonic missile project, that China had it and we didn't, and we had fallen behind, that's garbage. We had that. It was shut down, and within 2 years, China had the project. They actually had we'll call it the schematics, the information, and I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we all know how that happened.
Exactly, yeah.
But I'm glad you brought that up, because I wasn't aware of your background in that area, but Russia's new Oreshnik missile system is causing a lot of panic in certain military circles. I've done an analysis of the Oreshnik, some of the math of the kinetic energy that's released upon impact and so on. If we get a chance, I'd love to ask for your take on that new missile system. You've already hinted that the hypersonic weapons of the U.S. were really shut down, so we should have had a hypersonic.
We actually did. We ran a test off of the Marshall Island chain. It worked. Well, the second test worked. The first test gave rise to my project, because when you're in upper atmosphere, you cannot use fins. You have no, there's not enough air, if you will, to cause friction to turn the thing.
Right.
So you have to use steering jets. The steering jets are located right, past the nose cone, basically. Nose cone's looking out in infrared, looking for the target, and it's acquiring the target, setting up a vector to intercept. And when they fired the steering jet, there was a small vortex that came around into the nose cone area, and it blinded itself with its own heat. And that gave way to part of the project that I worked on for many years. You can actually, it's been declassified. You can actually go online and type in Mach 5, M-A-C-H 5, comma, Colsa, C-O-L-S-A. And it'll pop up, and it'll tell you that at one time we were the 16th, I think it was, fastest, largest computer on the planet, not including NSA, because they don't tell you anything. And that's where we were modeling this. And yeah, just overnight it shut down, and all of a sudden, and we had it up to Mach 6, going to Mach 7, pretty clean. We had actually gotten a solution, and we were applying it, stepping up the speed, applying it again, and it was working fine. And then all of a sudden,
Wow.
It disappeared. Yeah, it disappeared, and it showed up in China, and then again in Russia. Go figure.
Well, that's really interesting that I'm reading here that system had achieved 25 teraflops, and that was back in 2003, 2004, something like that.
Yeah, it was screaming. It was screaming.
That's a lot of teraflops for that long ago. Of course, today people are practically running that on their gaming rigs with the NVIDIA GPUs. You know
Moore's
what I
law, isn't it? Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. It's Moore's law.
mean?
Well,
Yeah,
here's
but
a little something before we get back to that project. There was so much heat generated. They asked me to do to help with the electrical system and the dumb things that smart people don't think of. This kind of falls in that classification. It was kind of interesting. There was a lot of a lot of air going through there to cool that system. Moore's law doesn't tell you that, it says that you're going to get smaller and faster, but what it doesn't tell you is that means
your heat
unless
goes
you,
up
that's
exponentially
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So we had so much cooling running under the system that in Alabama, we were producing an Olympic-sized swimming pool of condensate every few weeks. How do you get rid of it? So they wouldn't let us dump it because that would be industrial dumping. So we had to come up with a solution. But part of that
You,
solution was uh, to water the yard next to us that we owned.
yeah.
And then that ran off and became part of the stream, which went right back into the system that they didn't want us to dump in anyway. But since it came through the yard, it was considered runoff. That's how
Right. So
stupid
you
our
were
laws
dumping
are.
heat into the ground
Yeah.
next door.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that should work. I mean,
Oh, it worked good.
Earth mass has a lot of thermal mass. Thermal coefficient of dirt is pretty good, pretty high.
Yeah. So, and we were only dumping water, which was a condensate from from the air conditioning system. So it wasn't real hot, but it was nice and
Uh-huh.
warm, and the grass grew mightily.
That's really interesting. Okay. Well, it's funny because I was thinking about this Russian missile system, the Oreshnik, the hazelnut system, and these submunitions that are cone shaped that are coming down at incredible speeds, much higher than Mach 10. But Mach 10 is that's what the missile travels at. But these submunitions come down at something greater than Mach 10. Nobody knows for sure. But I was thinking about the stability factors. I mean, how do you stabilize a cone-shaped munition? If you get a little shimmy, it's toast. It's gone. Right?
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering off the top of my head if they're not making it spin to stabilize it, but I don't know. For one thing, it was 2003, and
Right.
and for the other thing, as you probably know, your clearance goes away with your contract, and it's kind of kept as far as the secret clearance goes. It's kept for about 2 years, and then it just goes away. You have to redo it. So I'm
Uh-huh.
out of the loop.
All right. Well, fair enough. But this is fascinating, and you and I should talk more about this because you and I both have a lot of interest in religion and history, but also we're both scientists. I run a mass spec food science lab, and we can talk about these things. So
That is interesting. I installed the first mass spectrometer here for Caraway Hospital when it was still in Alabama, still in Birmingham,
no
and
kidding.
that was for it was a magnetic spec, mass spec, and it was for the anesthesiology equipment. We would run it through, and then it would report real time. First time that this has been done. It's been so many years ago, Mike. And of course, it was the size of a refrigerator back then. I don't know what it is now. Probably you can fit it in your pocket. I don't know.
No, it's still, at least our mass spec instruments, they fit on this desk. Like it would take half the desk. That's a triple quad mass spec, so it's got really 3 quadruples in it, but very large vacuum turbines. You have to pull a strong vacuum, to eliminate background noise.
Yeah.
So they're still pretty hefty.
Yeah, we would have to pull the vacuum. There'd be special oil that would be in there because you couldn't have it. You couldn't have it evaporate when you lower your, you lower your barometric pressure. The thing will boil away if you don't watch it.
Yeah, that's right. No, we have in our lab we have what are called rough pumps, and the rough pumps run this oil, but they're under the table. They do the rough pull of the vacuum, and then the turbines in the units do the final couple orders of magnitude of vacuum pulling.
I did not realize that we had so much in common. That's interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
But science is science, isn't it? And once I looked at some they sent me to do some photonic. Well, to digress slightly, when you have that much air flowing through your system, tornadic activity can happen in a space of about 3-4 feet. So you're walking down the hallway and you'll find 72, 68, 104. Well, what just happened? Well, you've got a small tornado there. You have to
Yeah.
break up the vortex and keep the air flowing without getting into these little cyclones.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, I sat down to do some work on a FLIR system, scientific FLIR,
Yeah.
forward-looking infrared, and yeah, it was really interesting because it was Kirchhoff's voltage and current laws set in photons. I mean, what goes in goes out. You can't have a loss of energy, and all you do is just convert the units, and it's the same science.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of the the PMT, the photon multiplier, the sensor on the mass spec instruments. You know how they bounce the mass off of the multiplier to create a electric current, which gives you the count, and they can count the atoms of an element.
Yeah, I don't know that ours was that sophisticated. We were, of course, doing weight. So you have the magnet here that you know what's going on. You know
Okay.
exactly. And then as you pump it out, you pump the ions out. The weightier, more massive photon or molecules or atoms go straight, and the others are turned more and more by the magnet, and so you have a magnetic pull that gives you
Yeah.
an atomic weight.
Well, no, that sounds exactly like a quadrupole. So what you're really measuring is the mass to charge ratio, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You would tune it to mass to charge.
It's interesting. Let me turn this phone off.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. M over Z, folks, for those listening, if you want to geek out with us one day. But yeah, that's cool. But it's fascinating that both of us have an interest in the Bible and in history and in the hidden books. And also the fact, I love the fact that you're so open-minded, because one of the things about a religion is that people get really locked into their beliefs, and they often don't want them challenged at all. But you and I, we want to challenge people's beliefs, and sometimes people get angry. Sometimes they get enlightened. So
yes,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing, but we are truly killing each other. So I'm going to digress just a little bit, if you don't mind. Just going to kind of ramble for a second. Do you know what the axial age is?
No, I don't.
This is really interesting. Human beings came out, whatever it was, 200 million years ago, and we were the same for a long time. And then all of a sudden something happened and we began to develop at this enormous rate. Well, there's something like that happened spiritually. It's called the axial age. So around 700 BC, it seems like the spiritual part of humanity woke up overnight. And what I mean by that is we were out trying to please a God that took sacrifice, delighted in blood, and needed animals and people to be killed before they can be satisfied. How we got that idea, I have no idea. I mean,
yeah, I don't know. That's one of the parts of the Bible that bothers me the most. And it bothered God, and it bothered Jesus too.
Yes, and it speaks more of humanity than it does of God.
Yep, I agree.
So all of a sudden, in this period of time, Zoroaster, Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tzu, and all the way to Jesus, so we got from about 700 to about 4 BC or whatever, and so all of these minds came available at the same time, and they all were saying the same thing: look inside, don't look outside. You can wake up, and we began to get away from the sacrifice and the terror and the killing. And so what we have on this planet right now are two things. We have wars because of greed and avarice. You can put Putin in that area. And then we have wars between those who are pre and those who are post axial age. there are religions that never came out of the axial age, even though they may have been created after the event. And these are the religions that say, if you don't believe like we are going to, we're going to kill you.
Would
We're
you
going
be
to convert
referring to
you.
Judaism?
I am referring to Islam.
Islam? Because I'm just wondering, because we're seeing a lot of killing going on in the Middle East right now.
Yeah,
and
we truly are.
Nobody wants to find common ground at the moment, it seems.
Right. Yeah. And those two religions are kind of pre-axial age religions, even though I've never seen I haven't seen very many Jewish terrorists, but we can discuss that at some other length. They definitely they are out for blood now, but I feel like they got kicked first, and they've been kicked so many times that they're tired of it. So, but that's just my personal belief.
Sure.
Anything in my head could be wrong, right?
Well, we all have to operate under that philosophy. But importantly, you said there was this sort of simultaneous awakening to a spiritual reality, and I assume that you mean that was multicultural.
Absolutely, because if you look at across the spectrum from Buddha to Jesus and Lao Tzu included and Zoroaster and all of these guys that are basically saying, we probably shouldn't be killing to please God. It really doesn't make any sense. He made everything. Why would he want it destroyed? Let's kind of look at ourselves and try to figure this out. And those religions, they're the ones that tend to come out on top, if you will, humanity-wise.
Okay, so does this mean that will there be another age of awakening?
Oh man, you're a guy after my own heart. I've been preaching this now for several years. I believe that we're coming to a point that we'll be forced into a second axial age.
Wow.
I really do. I really do. I think it's going to.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think it's going to be kind of get it right or get dead kind of thing. Our humanity has been left behind by our technology.
Yes. Our morality has evaporated, and we worship false idols. I mean, we worship transhumanism and AI and material wealth, and all these things.
Yes. So I believe at the end of the day here, we probably will end up leaving religion, if you will, behind and picking up spirituality. My religion, my personal belief is based on apophatic theology. That is to say, a negative theology. Anything that you can experience with your senses, anything that you can think of, anything that you can imagine, that's not God. That might be a reflection, it might be an echo, but that's not God. And we just keep on digging and digging and digging until we find him. But that means that we have to put aside all of our preconceived ideas. And we have to come to a point that we understand that doctrine is like glass. You might be able to see the truth through it, but you can't touch it. It has to be experienced personally. I think when we finally get to that point, we can leave our books behind and actually sit down and figuratively speaking, talk to God.
So does this mean that in the Christian tradition, talk about the second coming of Christ, which always struck me as really allegory,
Me too,
yeah. There's a lot of that, especially in the New Testament. But the second coming of Christ, might it be a second awakening?
I certainly hope so. That is my hope. That is my dream. That somehow, some way, humanity will wake up and go, the truth is not really in the Quran. The truth is really the entire truth. It's not in the Bible. The truth is where you meet it along. If you, I don't know if you've read the book. If you meet Buddha on the road, kill him. But that's basically where I'm going with this. It's like we are all Buddha. We're all Jesus. We have this in us. We have this divine flame. Jesus himself said, more than these things will you do. And how could we do these unless we have that that same spiritual knowledge in us somewhere?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's even I've argued that the existence of consciousness and free will is a little sliver of what I call God's consciousness. Let's say you've been given this little bit of consciousness that we experience from a first person perspective in this cosmic creation that sometimes I call it the simulation, and it's got interesting rules and laws that we try to uncover as scientists. We, try to figure out how these things work.
Yes, yes.
But there's more. I believe there's much more than this 3D world, and that our consciousness and our minds are not just emergent properties of the physical computational brain. Do you agree with that?
I wholeheartedly agree with it, because I believe that we may find, and I don't know, I mean, I'm just ranting here, just rambling, but I have this deep, deep belief that we're going to find that there's only one consciousness. It's just phasing in and out of all of us. It is a universal consciousness. Someone asked me, is the universe conscious? And I said, well, of course it is. We're here. We are observing the universe, and if there is no other consciousness, it is still conscious, and we are observing. We are the observers of what's going on. So, but I believe that it's far more than that. I think that we have an actual possible universal consciousness. There's many dimensions. Some people say 10 or 11. Some of these are so small that they're rolled up in a tiny little, well, it's 10 to the minus 33rd power.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even know the metric units to go that far. Yeah.
Yeah, it's centimeters. So it's subatomic, and it's almost like, I imagine it's stepping into the torus. You step into what looks like a phone booth, and it could be infinitely big, because you don't know what's going on within the dimension. So to be an atheist, you have to be all places at all times at one time in all dimensions to say that there is no God. So I think that's a pretty arrogant thing to do. I'm say you're an agnostic all day long, but if you're a dyed-in-the-wool atheist, I think you've got an ego problem.
Well, I would agree with that. But let me take this one step further with you, though. Then, if we ultimately are expressions of one consciousness, and that grand consciousness is the creator, then don't we also have some expression, some sliver of the power of creation ourselves? And that gets into, I think, the relationship between the observer and the collapse of the wave function and quantum physics. And are we creating as we are observing? In other words, are we co-creating this universe in real time as we experience it?
That I don't know, but it seems to have some evidence. Don't know how deep to go into this, but so I'm going to start back a little bit, and just forgive me for digressing, but this is how I think. All right, so our religion continues to evolve. Our Christianity continues to evolve, and it evolves based on what we're exposed to, and what information we have. So prior to about 1800, nobody ever thought about the rapture. The rapture was not around. The rapture wasn't even an idea. It's just a construct by, I think it actually came out, my personal opinion, came out of a novel that was written in Spain, and it was read, and basically it made its way to Scotland. The idea preached really, really well. Schofield put it into his Bible because he loved the way that it preached, and it became a doctrine. But it was never a doctrine. Okay, so we know that our religion changes based on what we're exposed to and what we like and dislike, and we know that we create God in our own image. If you're a agricultural society, your God is the God of thunder and rain, and if you're a war society, then your God is a warrior, and so on and so forth. So a few years ago, late 1800s, something started developing within Christianity called the New Thought movement. Florence Shinn was part of that movement. She was a great influence, and through her teachings came Mary Baker Eddy and by transmission Napoleon Hill, and then you had the hyper faith movement that came out of that, which was Charles Capps and Kenneth Copeland and all of these name it and claim it kind of theologies. And they probably have such a small seed of truth that they never will go away, but they're being misused. And of course, the only people that really get absolutely filthy rich on that kind of theology is the preachers themselves. It's interesting.
Right.
But
which is
yes,
exactly what Christ taught against, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. They're the Pharisees they're shearing the sheep right now.
Yep.
But the sheep have to want to be sheared, and the sheep have to be stupid enough to keep following them. And as the old quote from Star Trek or Star Wars says, what's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows him?
Well, yeah, that's true. But also, these are not the droids you're looking for, which I think would refer to the false idols, the worship of the false gods. And you see so many people that they do worship like a charismatic preacher, pastor type of figure who is actually misleading them. And they are, see, this is why I love having you on, because I see in the common churches today the withholding of information, even just from the Bible itself. The more of the Bible that I read and teach in my own sermons, the more I realize that almost nobody's willing to touch these passages. And I know you've encountered this over and over again.
Well, I encountered one just literally this morning. I was reading in Job 38 and just happened to be there for some reason. And it says, can you draw out Maseroth? Can you pull out her bear and her cubs? And I'm thinking, what in the world? And I looked real quick in the Hebrew, and it's zodiac. And they just completely they avoided using that because they didn't want the Christians to go astrology on them. So
right. So it was the Ursula, or what's the bear zodiac?
Yeah, Ursa Major.
Ursa Major.
Yeah, which is what we call the Big Dipper.
Wow. So Christians get crazy. You start talking about stars, which is bizarre to me, because if God created the cosmos, shouldn't we be looking at his creation and seeing what's happening?
Yeah, he asked in another place, he says, can you control Leviathan? Well, that has two meanings. It's a sea beast, but it's also the largest constellation that you can see. So there's a lot of talk about astrology and a lot of talk about that in Enoch. It has an entire portion of the book dedicated to that, and it's of course they believe it's Babylonian-based astrology, but it doesn't really matter. It's still the same principles.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the hidden concepts, I'm really glad you mentioned the Book of Giants, because I've interviewed other guests who talk about giants and the fallen angels actually having offspring with humans and these types of things. And there are even credible accusations that the Smithsonian, for example, has been hiding, archaeological evidence of very large beings, i.e. giants. And and I know sometimes people just scoff at that. Oh, you think it's all made up. But actually in what you write about, I mean, this was common knowledge until the last couple centuries, wasn't it?
Isn't that interesting that I ask my friends who scoff at me, do you really believe that God said less and less as time goes on? Does that make any sense to you at all? Well, of course they don't. And I say, well, then why is the oldest denomination 81 books and the youngest denomination 66 books? And even at our 66 books, you had people like Luther and the like that were going, I really hate the Book of James. I should burn Jimmy in the fire. If I could, I'd set him on fire.
Sounds like something Paul would say.
Yeah, Paul was an asshole. Let's just face it. Yeah. So, but yes, it's being hidden because it's a third rail. You don't want to. You look, when I say that I do not want anybody that I love to go down this rabbit hole, I mean it. I mean it sincerely, wholeheartedly. You don't want to ask that question if you're at peace. If you're at peace with your religion and your faith and you're good with it, don't ask the question. Just walk away. Just walk away. Because once you get down here, it never stops. Every year they come up with a different, somebody's dug up something and you look at it and you go, well, that resets everything, doesn't it?
Right.
And these things are never told to the congregation. We
Right.
keep these things away from the congregation because we don't want to disturb the sheep. And we don't want to disturb the sheep because, for one thing, they pay the bills. And so you don't want them running off, and you don't want them scattering. You just want to keep them here, keep them peaceful, say the same things over and over again, repeat the same things every year, just drill it in their heads, and feed them pablum and send them home. Because the moment that you stand up and you go, new discovery, vision of Gabriel, talks about a Messiah that's 100 years before Jesus. What are you going to do with that information? They don't want to know it. They don't want to think about it.
That's right. Well, I mean, a lot of modern churches don't even acknowledge that Jesus cast out demons. They don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what I love about this, and I think you and I are both really curious people. Our audience, they're very curious. They do want to peel away the layers of the onion. They want to go down the rabbit hole because they want a deeper understanding of how things work and how we came to be. By the way, the history of human origins is at stake in all of this. And
yeah,
I think we've been lied
history
to
of God
about
is at
that.
stake too.
Yes.
And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's not a God. I thoroughly, absolutely believe that there is a God. But our understanding and our methodology it has changed to a point that you must keep asking the same question. Where did that come from? What happened before that? Why did that happen?
Right.
And you come to an understanding that probably Yahweh, the way that we understand it now, and there's several different theories, but Yahweh may have been part of the El Asheroth pantheon, right? Canaanite pantheon. But he also has been dug up in Teman. Uh, that city and that area used to be a smelting and mining facility. Something happened, and the Egyptians that were running the place quit. They ran. I don't know what happened, but they disappeared. And then this Canaanite group came in, and they started the mine back up, and they expanded it 100 times. And they were worshiping a god that did not have a name and did not have a face, and they referred to him through the tetragraph of Yahweh. And that's the first time that we see this God stand alone, which is really interesting. If you look at first Genesis, it refers to God as El. By the time you get to second Genesis, it refers to him as the Lord God, or Elyon. By the time you get past that, he's Yahweh. And so we had something take place where it almost looks like the Son replaced the Father, you might say. And this is addressed, of course, because Genesis, I think it is. No, it's where is that? It's Psalms 82. Yeah. So Psalms 82 tells us. No, I'm sorry. It's Deuteronomy 32. Deuteronomy 32 tells us that God stood in and he divided the nations. So here we go. Remember the days of old, consider years long ago. Ask your father, he'll inform you. Ask your elders, they'll tell you. When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided mankind, he fixed the boundaries of the people according to the number of the gods. Well, that's
Huh.
interesting, isn't it?
Huh. Yeah.
And the Lord's own, now that's the Lord is Yahweh. Yahweh's own portion was his people of Jacob, and that was his allotted share. And it goes on, but that's look up a couple of the versions and you'll see they kind of skate around here, but the New Revised Standard updated edition pretty well nails it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to ask you too a related question, which is how much of the original underlying languages, and whether it's Hebrew or Arabic in some cases, or Greek or what have you, how much of that from the original writings has been deliberately perverted by the New King James Version, for example? What's your answer to that? Because as I'm reading, I don't know how much I can trust the translations.
I have two answers for that, and neither one of them. Some of our audience will not like either one of these answers.
Okay.
When you look at a translation, you've got 2,000 years of scribal interference. What they would do is they would look at something and they would go, well, that doesn't quite fit here. He must mean this. And they would change the words. So that's the first kind of contortion. The second type is, of course, just scribal errors, right? The third type is really interesting. It's like, that ended flat. I don't think it should end that way. Let's add something to it. Two examples. Then I'll quit there. So the first one is the Lord's Prayer. It ends, if you're a Protestant and you're reading King James, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Phenomenal. I mean, I love it. The doxology, I love the doxology. It ain't there. And that's why it doesn't occur in the newer Revised Standard versions and things like that. It just simply wasn't there if you go back 1,000 years. So a scribe added it. Second one, the end of Mark. They'll pick up snakes, they'll drink poison, they won't be harmed, they'll heal the sick, they'll raise the dead, go forth and conquer and all that stuff. Not in there. Now, I live in Alabama. Right up the road here are the snake handlers. And every year, someone dies. They believe they're following the scriptures. They really believe that they're testing their faith and they're doing exactly what the scriptures say. But they absolutely will not believe, because they believe, and I actually had one of them tell me this. I swear to you, it's not made up. If the King James is good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for us.
Wow.
Okay.
How does that that doesn't make any sense.
It does to them. So
if you have a time machine, maybe.
I don't know. So yeah, but I just throw this out there because there's a lot that has been added, perverted. More than likely, the story of Jesus and the woman caught in adultery is an addition, a later addition, probably around 600, 700. It's great. It preaches really well, but we have the same thing that happened in Enoch. Enoch was written in 5 different stages over a period of about 300 years.
Well, let me ask it this way. Let me add this, because today we have the highly perverted Wikipedia, which is run by the CIA.
Yeah.
And everybody who's questioning narratives is defamed all across Wikipedia. So the government tells Wikipedia what is truth, right? So why wouldn't we assume that during the time that scribes were or transcribing all these different passages and books and the letters, and all the records of Jeremiah and everything else, at some point wouldn't whatever government was in power at the time, Rome in the proper era, wouldn't Rome say, well, we want to make sure that the Bible says that everybody should be loyal to Rome?
Well, it does, doesn't it?
Romans, yeah, and in Rome, there it is, right in Romans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So,
yeah.
but that's Paul again.
Yeah, but some people think that Paul was a plant. I mean,
Yeah.
it gets kind of interesting, doesn't it? So you've got a guy who comes in, and James, the brother of Jesus, has been given the reins to the church in Jerusalem, and he's been there for a while. And so Paul doesn't start even doing anything until about 50 AD. So Jesus has been dead for about 20 years. James has been running the place. Everything's fine. Almost everything. Everybody's Jewish. If you're a Christian, they call it the Jesus cult or the way, and so it's part of Judaism. He didn't come to start a new religion. He started to clean up his own. And then Paul gets there, and so you have about 2 to 5% of the population at that time that were Jewish, and just a sliver of those became converts to Christianity. So Paul decides that he's going to open the doors to the Gentiles, and there's a little discussion about it, and it's a little heated. And so Paul decides, and he literally basically says this: I know you're the brother of Jesus. I know you've been with him all your life, but hey, I met him on the road. He gave me some stuff. I was, in the desert, in the wilderness, and I visited with him there in the spirit, and this is what he wants me to do, so I'm going to go do it. Well, that takes a lot of chutzpah.
Yeah.
For me to walk in and tell the brother of the Lord that he doesn't know what the Lord wants. And so he opens up the door to the Gentiles, and then he basically makes the religion of Jesus a religion about Jesus, and Christianity takes off.
And then Paul presents himself as being granted authority by Jesus to all the other churches.
That's right.
And then a lot of contradictions, obviously, in what Paul was teaching versus what Jesus was teaching. But
indeed, yeah. But keep in mind that out of the 13 letters that are supposed to be written by Paul, probably only about 7 of them are really Pauline.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, it's kind of generally accepted by most of the scholars, and it has to do with the language, vocabulary, theology. You kind of look at, Hebrews is the absolute, it's out there. That's probably not Pauline at all. Most people say, nah, and then Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John never say that they're by Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. There's no place in there that says that. And they actually were written a little bit too late for them to be the apostles. So probably written by followers, but not actually penned by the apostles.
Interesting. Well, we're almost out of time here today, but I would say this conversation is a really fascinating first chat to have you as a guest here. Just kind of peeling back the layer of, there's a lot of hidden knowledge.
Yeah.
A lot of hidden knowledge. And let me bring up your website again. It's fifthestatepub.com. And here you have Discover Ancient Wisdom and Lost Scriptures, some of your best-selling books here, the Lost Books of the Bible, books of Enoch, the Book of Giants, and so on. What are you working on right now?
Well,
or are you able to talk about it?
Oh, no, it's fine. The Secret Gospel of Mark. I don't even have it with me here, but so there's a version of Mark that's a bit longer. So we're working on that. That was discovered in 1958. Not a whole lot's been done with it. It was discovered in a monastery outside of Jerusalem. It's an interesting story that we probably don't have time for, but it has some interesting stuff. It clears up some things. Who was the guy that was the young man who was arrested or was there when Jesus was arrested, that was in the sheet? Where did he come from? What was he doing? And why was he naked? And so when they grabbed Jesus and they wanted to grab the others, they grabbed the sheet. The guy ran off out from under the sheet and he escaped. We don't know anything about this guy. And this particular version fills all that in.
Huh. All right. Well, that is fascinating. And like you say, every year, more ancient records are being found, ancient scrolls, tablets in
Yes.
some cases, even.
Yeah.
So, well,
Yes. So
this
there's
body of
a
knowledge is
lot
going to
out
keep
there.
expanding.
This is the last one they came up with. This is the vision of Gabriel, and this tells the story of Gabriel addressing the corpse rotting in the desert, calling him the Prince of Peace, dung of the rocky crevasse, and tells him to rise again in 3 days.
He's talking to a corpse.
He's talking to a corpse.
And he says, rise again in 3 days.
Yeah, I,
And
Gabriel, command thee.
This was long before Christ.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. It's that's the last one that we put out that before I started working on this other one.
So was he disappointed when the corpse did not rise in 3 days, or is that
We're
covered?
not told what happened to the corpse.
Yeah, not everybody has the resurrection power, you know.
There you go.
It's a very limited skill set.
I love that. Yeah.
Only certain chosen emissaries from God get that one.
There you go.
Some people can cast out demons. Very few can resurrect. Okay. But I have to say, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. And I hope this is the first of many, because I want to read some of your books before we talk again, so I have more knowledge. But I really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, have them drop me an address, and I'll send you the Lost Books or the Book of Enoch or whatever you want to chew on, and be glad to come back at any time.
Oh, well, that's very gracious of you. Thank you for that offer. I'll take you up on that.
Sure.
So thank you for all your time today. And let me just remind our audience, our guest has been Joseph Lumpkin, and the website again is fifthestatepub.com, correct?
That's right.
Okay, fifthestatepub.com. All right, so Joseph Lumpkin, thank you so much for your time today. God bless you. I hope you're okay with me saying that.
Absolutely.
I said, God bless everybody. Let's have life and joy and peace if we can, you know?
Yes.
And let's also try to understand who we are, where we came from, and what happens after this too, you know? Interesting stuff.
Good to meet a fellow traveler.
Yes, indeed. We are. And it's such a short journey in this realm. We might as well use it as best we can.
Right.
So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye. And thank all of you for watching. I'm Mike.